The hipster drummers of the world have been championing giant hi-hats over the last few years. Is this just a dumb fad, or is there something cool to it? Let's find out. We're going to compare a pair of 20-inch hi-hats with a pair of 14-inch hi-hats. And at the end of the video, we're going to add a little something extra to the 20s to see if we can enhance their sound. Hey everybody, welcome to The Non-Glamorous Drummer. If you're new to the channel and you've yet to subscribe, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Let's jump down to the kit.
Wow, okay. These are giant hi-hats. In case you couldn't tell, I repurposed my 20-inch K-Custom Dark Ride that's normally right here, and my A 20-inch Crash that I've put way over to the right occasionally. So I have that on the bottom, so that's the thicker, heavier cymbal, and then I have the thinner, darker K-Custom Dark Ride on top. We've got 20-inch, we're going to compare these with 18-inch, with 16-inch, with 14-inch, and so we'll kind of see the differences between them. First, let's kind of talk about some basic pros and cons, because let's say you do have an extra set of cymbals lying around. I have a bunch of A's and a bunch of K's, and so it happens that a lot of those are the same sizes, so it makes it easy to do this. I don't think that you can buy a pair of 20-inch hi-hats out there. I think that anybody who's doing that is repurposing crashes or ride cymbals. Of course, I had to adjust the spring tension of the stand so that it wouldn't just drop. So I've got the tension all the way tight, which feels about right. I don't think I'd want to do cymbals any heavier than this. If I mounted a tambourine on top, that would probably weigh it down too much. So just something to be aware of. You've got to really tighten up that tension on your hi-hat stand and make sure it'll pop up the top cymbal. So the first obvious thing is if you don't like having hi-hats close to you, this is going to be a problem because they're so much closer. Just for reference here, here's one of my 14-inch hi-hats. If we set this on top here, just resting on top of the clutch, you can see how much smaller a 14-inch cymbal is compared to the 20-inch. And so that's just how much closer to you it's going to be. If we do the math there, it's going to be 3 inches closer to you if you're going from 14-inch to 20-inch. So you can think of it that way, or you can think of it, okay, now your foot's got to be further away. You've got to extend your leg out, which could be a good thing. That might not be a bad thing at all. It might be nice to be able to extend your leg a little further and still have the cymbals close. So something to play around with, something that you may like or you may not like. The initial question though was, okay, with the big hi-hat thing being such a hipster kind of thing, it's always the hipster drummers that always seem to be doing that. Is it just a fad? Is it dumb? Is it overkill? Or is it actually kind of cool? Those are kind of the questions that we're asking here that we want to keep in mind as we're listening to all of these. And just to give you a little of my input as we're testing these out, because you get to form your own opinion as you listen to these. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, which has a lot to do with their personal tastes and what kind of music you play, what you listen to. But my thoughts are that the larger the hi-hats are, the gushier they're going to be. There might still be some attack. It's going to be harder to get a really tight closed sound out of them because there's just always going to be that loose gushiness. But that loose gushiness means that they're going to sit better in a mix that maybe there needs to not be a cutting hi-hat in. Let's say the song doesn't call for a lot of closed cutting hi-hat. Maybe you're not even close miking the hi-hats when you're recording it. Maybe it literally needs a kind of a background sort of hi-hat sloshiness. Well, that's where there is something to say for the big hats because they just sit back there in the mix and they don't get in the way of anything. I heard a drummer say one time he really liked using 15-inch hi-hats just because they were a little bit darker than 14s and they didn't interfere as much with the frequencies as the electric guitars. It all depends on what the guitar players are doing, what other instruments are in the mix. But if your hi-hats are too present and they're getting too much in the way, having bigger hats can actually help solve that problem. So what we're going to do now is cycle through each pair of hi-hats. I'm going to switch these back out to my 14s. And so I'm just going to play a basic groove and we're going to go straight from the 14s to 16s to 18s to 20s. And then we're going to try something a little different with the 20s to see how unique we can make these sound. Okay, so I do think that out of the oddly sized cymbals, I wasn't a big fan of the 16s, maybe because they were both fairly thin crashes. They just didn't, I don't know, they didn't sound that cool. The 18s were okay, but honestly, I think the 20s are the coolest. Maybe it has to do with the fact that it's a ride cymbal on top rather than a crash. So it means it's a little bit thicker, kind of like most hi-hats. Hi-hats are not super thin. They're actually kind of thick when you think about the size. Like the thickness to size ratio is a little different from with crash cymbals. Maybe that's the key here. If you've got a ride cymbal to put on top, that's probably going to sound better than if you've got both crashes. Of course, rides only go so small, so from here we could go to, I don't know, 21-inch hats, 22, 24-inch hats if I had cymbals that big, but I don't, so this is as big as we're going to go. But I said I was going to try something else. There's a bunch of sustain on these already. I love how there's so much sustain, so much slosh. It's just a constant kind of sound that could be really great for certain genres of music, certain songs. I'm going to put a sizzler on it, though. We'll see what happens with the sizzler, because that's going to add a little bit more of the high end. You know, we've got a lot of this low end kind of gushiness, which is cool, but can we add a little bit more sizzle, and will it increase the sustain? Could that sound better? So let's listen to it without the sizzler, and then with the sizzler, you guys tell me which one you like more. Now taking it off. It's interesting, there's not actually as huge of a difference as I would think, and it might be because the sizzler is so small and the cymbals are so big. But tell me what you think in the comments, and maybe as I go back and I'm mixing this and I'm listening to the recordings, I might find that, oh, the sizzler does make a big difference, because as it's being picked up by the overhead mics, it's going to sound a little different than to my ear through these. I don't have a ton of these mics in my ears, so I don't know, we'll see.
I hope this video helped you out and provided you with something interesting. Whether or not you'd like to try something like this with your kit, if you've got the extra cymbals lying around, be sure to share the video and become a fellow non-glamorous drummer by subscribing if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next video.